The world is full of people who believe in Jesus. But Jesus never said to believe. He said, if you want to be one of my disciples, follow me. There's a big difference between being a believer and being a disciple. This show, Red Letter Christianity, is about taking the words of Jesus seriously. You'll find them in the red letters of the Bible. If you take those words seriously and live them out, do the things that Jesus calls you to do, you will live a countercultural life. You'll stand opposed to the prominent moves of the culture. You will be a person who is a red letter Christian. Stay tuned and learn about a red letter Christian today. Listen, we have a really great guest for us today. His name is Leroy Barber, and you're going to enjoy what he has to say. I guess the word joy is a good word, but on the other hand, Kathy, it's going to be disturbing because this guy is a true red letter Christian. He's out there living out the words of Christ as highlighted in the red letters of the Bible, and is doing it in a difficult place in the tough neighborhoods of Atlanta, Georgia. He heads up an organization called Mission Year. Have you ever heard of it?
I have not. I was talking to him a little bit beforehand, and it feels like he's got his hands in a lot of things.
Oh,
you know,
he's
multifaceted guy.
I don't know how he gets it all done. He heads up Mission Year, which is in several cities. I'm not sure how many, 5, 4, but they're teams of about 15 to 30 in each city.
Okay.
And these kids live in community. Do you know what that means? That means like 5 or 6 of them.
Where do they live?
They rent a house in this derelict neighborhood. That's a nice word, isn't it? Derelict neighborhood. Tough neighborhood. And they live together, and they have very little money. So they kind of cook their own meals. They try to clean the place together. The houses are pretty tough looking houses.
And these kids, how are they funded? You know?
Well, they raise their own support.
Okay.
You know, each kid has to raise his or her own support. In any given year, they probably have anywhere from 75 to 110 young men and women who are doing this for a year. In England, they have a thing called gap year, which I think would be a good thing here in the United States, so that when kids graduate from high school, they don't go right into college. That's an American thing. We get, you know, you graduate high school, and they all ask you, what school are you going to go to next year? And you go right into college. In England, you take a year off. That's called a gap year.
Which is so great.
Yeah, and some of them travel.
Right.
A lot of them do work in various places. We've had a lot of them come to Philadelphia and work in our programs there. Some of them have come and joined this Mission Year program.
Don't you wish every kid, it just was mandated,
well,
whatever it was, to serve, because it just not only expand their own character and their worldview, probably.
You know, I speak at a lot of Christian colleges in the course of a year, and I try from time to time to recruit people to work in this Mission Year program that Leroy Barber heads up.
Right.
And one of my lines is, what are you doing in school anyway? If you're a junior, if you were asked to take the final exams from your freshman year, do you think you could pass them? Of course you couldn't. But I'm going to ask you this. What did you do with the textbooks that you had from those courses? I know what you did. You sold them. What did you do with your notes? I don't know. I guess I lost them or something. Great. So you can't remember what you learned. You don't have the textbooks. Sure. You lost the notes, and you call this higher education? You need to take a year off and spend it serving Jesus Christ in something like Mission Year.
That's so good, yeah.
We really have to get kids to begin to see that they need a year to catch their breath after high school and to get serious about life. And nothing will make them more serious about life than living in this derelict neighborhood, this rundown neighborhood, living together with a group of kids who are themselves poor because we don't let them. I think they only have about $50 a month to live in.
Well, I know my nieces, when they were in high school, my sister, encouraged them to go on different trips and serve, and it really absolutely affected what they're doing with their lives now and how they see people and view people around the world.
You're going to like Leroy because Leroy is an incredible, likable person. But you're going to have to ask him about all the other stuff that he's in.
I know, he's involved in so
all
much.
over the place, you know, and he's speaking on the speaking circuit. But most of all, he's recruiting.
Oh, he speaks too.
Oh, he is an excellent speaker. Yeah, he's an excellent. I don't think Mission Year would work if he wasn't such an excellent speaker, because when he speaks, he really lures kids into saying, I want to work with this man. I want to work in his program.
So even though it's based around the area of Atlanta, they're coming, the kids are coming from
No, it's not based in. He has a program in Atlanta, but he's got a program in Houston.
Oh, okay.
In Oakland.
It's all over the
He's got
United
one
States.
Next year in Philadelphia. He's got a program in Chicago. You can ask him all the cities they're in.
Yeah, sure.
But you're going to love meeting Leroy Barber. So don't go away. Leroy Barber, Mission Year. He's going to be talking about it. And you guys out there, you women out there, you ought to consider joining this thing.
Leroy, you know, when I think about red letter Christianity, I see you, I see your face and what you're doing, because I just hearing about all you're involved in, but I haven't heard about Mission Year until now that we're talking about it. I think it's fascinating, and you're speaking and you're serving and you're a pastor, but how did you come to even get the idea for Mission Year?
Well, I think for me, Mission Year kind of represents, I think, for where I was in my 20s, and I think for a lot of young adults between 18 and 29, kind of where you wind up sometimes. For me, I wound up in this place of going to church, being a part of church, you know, having this head knowledge of faith and this kind of Sunday morning kind of thing for the most part. But I lived in this neighborhood to where there was a lot of struggle, a lot of poverty, you know, friends, all of a sudden their lives are spiraling down, and the two didn't go together. Right. You know, here was my faith, here was my church, and here was my community, and they didn't match up. And I think Mission Year, for what that was for me, how that began for me was I need to bring these two things together. I need to figure out how my faith is going to connect to my community. And I was about 25 when that happened. And I think Mission Year represents that now.
How did you get it going? Like, you get this idea, you get this vision, just for even people watching that have this, you know, prayer in their heart to do something like this. How do you take the first step? What did you do?
I just began to look around. Well, for me, I just jumped in. But, you know, now there are organizations like Mission Year that you can connect to if you're feeling that way. I jumped in Philadelphia, starting to do some homeless stuff. And
by yourself or with people?
With my wife and I. We just jumped in. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't understand the nonprofit world, but we knew God wanted something from our lives, and our faith was a part of that. And so
you got to raise money to do these things. Here you have Mission Year. How many cities are you in now?
We're at 7.
7 cities. Teams in each of these cities. There's about 4, 5, 6 to each house. Each team rents a house in a derelict, rundown neighborhood.
An urban neighborhood.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah.
He likes using those big words.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, urban neighborhood, but a tough neighborhood.
Yeah.
And they move in, and there they are. And they connect with the people around them, the neighbors. They do volunteer work in the area. What kind of stuff do they do in the area?
Oh, they work with various agencies. They work with an elementary school or high school, a homeless shelter. Yeah, you know, doing tutoring kids and
soup kitchen.
Soup kitchen.
How do you find
shelters.
the kids, Leroy? How do you find them to?
A number of ways. I go around and speak. We have recruiters that go around and talk with groups at colleges. We connect with other smaller college organizations that disciple young adults. A
lot of college students, mostly college students, especially kids coming out of college.
Right.
What we would like to do is get them after their first or second year of college to take a year off. Because that's when they begin to wonder, what am I doing here? I'm having to spend like $80,000 a year to go to school here.
Right.
It's a good question. Is the money I am spending to get an education really a good investment of God's resources? I mean, you got a kid who loves Jesus, and says, I gave my life to Jesus, does the Lord really want me to spend $80,000 a year to go to school, and I'm not sure I'm learning anything? I don't even know what I'm doing here. Right. A lot of kids at the end of the sophomore year are asking that question, what am I doing here? I'm spending all this money. This money could be used to feed the poor, to clothe the naked, to serve the desperate people of the world. I'm wasting God's money. Yeah. $80,000 a year. Maybe I need to step back and get some reflection on all of this. Joining Mission Year for a year is crucial because it helps them to get their heads together. And when they do go back to school, they really know what they're going to do there.
Absolutely.
Well, I would imagine, Leroy, do you keep in contact with them and see how serving for the year has affected their future or what they choose to do with their lives?
Well, we have some people that stay. Some people stay in the city and become teachers or social workers or those kind of jobs. Other folks go back to the churches where it came from and live a life in that community and live out some of the values that they've learned in Mission Year. And people go back to school or grad school. They're different when they go back, and that's kind of the goal, is that they go back a different person with a different set of values.
Actually, we have an arrangement between Mission Year and Eastern University, so that a kid going into Mission Year for a year can come to Eastern for grad studies. We have an urban studies program, and urban education, urban counseling, urban economic development, community development. They can major in urban studies in one of those fields of interest. And because of the year that they spend in Mission Year, they start off their graduate training with anywhere from 6 to 12 hours of credit. So it's a great start in graduate school because the Eastern's attitude is, hey, these kids learn more living in the city than they're ever going to learn in the classrooms here at the university. So credit is given, and we have quite a number of former Mission Year students at Eastern who are doing this graduate work. It's really quite remarkable.
Yeah, we kind of call it 1 year of practice, 1 year of theory.
I was asking you about raising money. You know, there's a problem that I'm sure you have to face, and nobody likes to talk about this. When an African-American guy tries to raise money, he has a lot of difficulty compared to what a white guy has to go through. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I wrote a blog on this a couple months ago.
I read it and was impressed by it.
Well, kind of there's just this.
Could you tell people where it is, just so they could? I'd like to read it.
That blog is on missionyear.org. It's on our website,
okay.
So you can find it there. But it really talks about the difficulty that organizations that have African Americans leading them, and how difficult it is for them to raise money. And quoted in that blog is Fred Smith, who's with The Gathering, and he, which is this large group of Christians that gather to give money. And he's quoted in there saying, yes, this is true because of lack of relationship and lack of networks that African Americans have.
Well, you take a city like Philadelphia. I would say 3/4 of the churches in Philadelphia that are pastored by African Americans are pastored by men and women who are bivocational. That is, they do the church thing on the side while they're trying to make their living driving for Federal Express or working in an office.
Yes.
And if you're a kid out of that church and you go back to that church and say, hey, I need money to spend a year in Mission Year, this pastor's saying, they don't have enough money to pay me, let alone pay this kid who's going to be working in some other community, probably working out of a church that is better off than we are. Right. It's a very different situation.
So how have you been able to combat that? And do you raise most of your funds by people encountering you when you go and you speak, and it's that they have to see you and believe you and trust you kind of a thing?
Yeah, we go the traditional route many of the times of creating relationships with donors, getting to know me getting to know them, telling this story, my story, as well as the folks serving in Mission Year telling their stories, and creating literally creating our own network of people that we can count on to give.
Where do you find that most of the service is done? Is it with the homeless? Is it with people who are sick? You know, where do you see the need is mostly in each of these cities? Is there one, you know, that comes to the top?
I would say education, of course, comes to the top. We do a lot of, we work in a lot of schools. We work in a lot of after-school programs, do a lot of tutoring. That would probably be where most people wind up. But we also do other stuff, you know, in social services, and then we have partners where we work with the homeless and then soup kitchens and those kinds of things.
And speaking of money, do most of these people raise it through their church or families, or?
Each person raises support. They have their own personal network of family and friends in church, and we ask them to raise that support over the year.
Yeah. So you can imagine the impact this has in the name of Jesus. When some kid, 19, 20 years of age, I call them kids because I'm old, I can call them kids when they're that. But they go into our high school and say to the principal, I want to give you 10 hours a week. You can put me in any classroom to be a teacher's assistant. I'll tutor kids. If you have problem children, I'll take them aside and I'll talk to them. I'll spend time with them and try to. And the teacher says, why are you doing this? You know, and you say, well, I'm with Mission Year. I'm down the street. Or can you imagine somebody knocking on the door, somebody opening the door saying, we stopped by here. We just want to get to know you. We're living down the street. You probably notice us. We're the white kids down the street. Most of your people are white, interestingly enough.
Is that right?
What would you say, 90%?
I would say, yeah, about 75%.
75% are white. So, you know, you're living in this African-American or Hispanic neighborhood, and you knock on the door, you probably notice that we white guys moved down the street. We'd like to pray a blessing on you and the people in this house. You don't have to invite us in. We can do it right here on the doorstep and pray a blessing. And say, is there any special need that you have? We'd like to help you to meet that need. And it makes a great impact in the neighborhood, a great impact in the neighborhood. Sometimes they run block parties. I know the Philadelphia teams in the past would rope off the street and get all the kids out on the street and have a block party in the evening with games and food and hot dogs and terrific things, making an impact for Jesus Christ in the neighborhood. There's a motto that I always had for Mission Year. I don't know whether you use it. It was this: you won't be able to carry out the Great Commission until you first carry out the Great Commandment.
Yes.
The Great Commandment is love your neighbor as you love yourself. Love your neighbor. After you have communicated love, then you're in a position to carry out the Great Commission, to tell them about Jesus. You wrote a book about neighbors. What's
New
the name
Neighbor, and it's the name of the book is New Neighbor, and it's stories of people that have done Mission Year and how they've become neighbors over the years. Some of their struggles, some of their triumphs.
There's this young woman that we were talking about just before we came on the show called Jamie Taylor, who's out there in Oakland. She did Mission Year for a year. She had a Bible study of about 15 really tough teenage girls, and she was making such progress that when the year ended, she didn't want to leave. So she stayed on, and she got a job, and she stayed on to nurture these girls. Well, this thing has grown and grown and grown. Now there are scores of people who are in this, what she calls the urban mentoring program. She's still there.
So the little Bible study turned into the urban mentoring program.
Yeah, and it's a big time thing in Oakland. And she's now reestablished connections with Mission Year because you're putting another team back in Oakland. You have one there now.
We have teams in Oakland right now.
Yeah, and Sacramento as well, don't you? And she's doing both.
She's doing both. She's directing both of those cities.
And in addition to doing her own program, which is urban mentoring, this woman is really giving her. And I am amazed at how many people work with Mission Year who end up saying, I can't leave. And they don't want to go back because it's the first time they've ever had friends in a neighborhood. They live in suburbia. In suburbia, nobody has friends. You don't even know the people who live across the street.
Right,
And
right.
in the
There's the
city, they've
connection.
gotten to know people. This is a wonderful experience.
Right, the community becomes rich
You know,
for them.
Italians in South Philadelphia.
Yeah,
you know,
no,
in
absolutely.
the Bronx. Where
You know, and
we-
I was brought up around the extended Italian family.
Yeah.
That was I had no friends till high school.
Yeah.
Because of the cousins and most people aren't brought up with that.
Tell me about this book that you contributed to, Unchristian. What young people are learning about the church or how they view the church today. What did you say in that?
Were you an author on that?
I was a contributor to it.
Right.
And they asked me to talk a little bit about the church in the urban context.
And what did you say?
I reflected on how many churches there were, which just in the neighborhood where I live in, and I can count about 1.5 miles to 2 square miles, there's 25 churches. And so there's a church on every corner,
sure.
pretty much. And but it's a struggling community. There's the typical urban stuff that you might see in a lot of neighborhoods of crime and drug activity and those type of things. But there's all these churches. So again, there's this disconnect of here's the church, here's the community, and those two things a lot of times don't come together.
And you probably know that I belong to an African-American church, Mount Carmel Baptist Church in West Philadelphia. And it's a substantial church. But the people in Mount Carmel once lived in that neighborhood, but they have become upwardly mobile. They've moved out to the suburbs. And so a lot of these African-American churches that are substantial in the city have people that don't live in the neighborhood.
Right.
They drive in on Sunday, they go to services, and they drive home. And the church does find itself disconnected with the people in the neighborhood
live right
itself.
there, yeah.
How do you think the kids in the neighborhood feel about the church?
I think it's neutral. If there was hate, it'd probably be better. If there was, extreme of love, it'd probably be better.
apathetic,
So it's just kind of neutral. It's just
I've noticed in our neighborhood in West Philadelphia, where our church is located, that they vandalize everything. Graffiti is everywhere, except on the church. There's a kind of an awe and a reverence of the church in these African-American kids. They don't go, but they sense that there is something there that is sacred. Yes, it's very, very important. Well, Leroy, may you get some volunteers out of this. Incidentally, if you folks out there want to find out about Mission Year, here's what you do. Go to our website, redletterchristians.org, and right at the top, you'll see the log on for the show, and you can learn all about Mission Year that way. Blessings on you, Leroy.
Thank you.
Thanks for being on the
Great
show.
to meet you, Leroy. God bless you. Tony, when I, just interviewing some of these people that are just embracing red letter Christianity and working in the trenches and really, truly having a Jesus heart for the community, and it grieves me to think about where we're missing the mark. In a lot of, not to judge the church, but a lot of what's happening in our churches, it's so isolated it's so small-minded. We build a mega church and we're reaching out somewhat, but not, it feels like we're missing the mark.
Yeah. I think there are these things. Earlier you heard people talk about John Perkins and the work that he has done, an African-American leader. And he talks about the fact that if the church is going to really impact urban neighborhoods, and the world is becoming an urban world, in third world countries, a country like the Dominican Republic or Port-au-Prince, at least half of the population of the entire country lives in the capital city. How do we impact cities? He says you have to relocate. You can't live in the suburbs and drive in and do your little Bible study. You have to live with the people, be among the people, which is what Mission Year tries to do. It says to a group of kids, you just can't sweep in here for 2 weeks and run a daily vacation Bible school.
Right.
Get in your cars, drive home to suburbia or back to the state you came from. You got to stay. As so many Christian young people say, oh, I spent 2 weeks in the inner city and it was such a wonderful experience. It changed me. Yeah, it changed you. But how did these kids feel when these people come in and 2 weeks, these kids who hadn't had anybody love them, and they fall in love with these young men and women who come in for 2 weeks, and then these people get in their cars and drive away. Once again, they feel abandoned.
Right.
If you're going to do it, move in, live in the neighborhood, be at one with the people, commit yourself.
Right.
You know, and
it's almost like the Lord with the disciples. There is that element of you have to be around them. You have to have this community and this trust.
Yeah.
And we do. We tend to speak more than we do.
There's this great verse in the Message, you know, Peterson's translation
Yeah, I
of the
love
Bible.
that. I love that.
And in the first chapter of John, Gospel of John, it's where it says, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us." He translated, and Christ became a human being and moved into our neighborhood. Whoa, that says it. That's what the incarnation is all about. Right. It's about Christ leaving heaven and living among us. And if we're going to be followers of Jesus, we will do that. We will go into those places, live among the people. And not only do we relocate, but we redistribute our resources. We take the money we have and share it with the needs of those who are around us. I could tell you wonderful stories of how these mission year kids have shared the little bit of money that they have with a woman who's in desperate need, who has to go to a doctor and has no medical coverage. Story after story of that kind of thing.
Well, and you know, Tony, I have to tell you, my little church in Leapers Fork, Tennessee, I love what my pastor's doing. We're raising funds, and we need a bigger church, but he's making classrooms to make disciples of the people he has.
Yeah.
So we could go out and do this kind of thing.
You know, I think we spend too much money on buildings.
Yes.
I mean, if Jesus had a choice between putting up a new building with stained glass windows and spending the money to meet the needs of the poor and the oppressed in the neighborhood, you and I know what he would do with the money.
Absolutely.
We know what he would do. And so there has to be a redistribution, and there has to be reconciliation. People often say whites and black. You can't come in and have a little meeting and sing Kumbaya. You know, with Mission Year, you got white kids moving into a black neighborhood, but they get to know the people get to know them. Reconciliation,
That's beautiful, yeah.
Relocation, reconciliation, redistribution of resources. These things are needed if we're to make a difference for Christ. Hey, I hope you like meeting Leroy. I hope you go to the website, Mission Year, but you can find it by going to our website, redletterchristians.org. We're right at the top of the list. You'll see the television show, and you can get more about this program. Blessings, and keep the faith.